Hi, g'day, Mr. Ominoid, Mr. Ominoid, gmail.com. A lot of people sometimes wonder where I get my sense of humour from. Well, I was born back in the 60s, and Bob Hawke was born back in the 40s. Anyway, this is Bob Hawke talking with Alan Bond after winning the America's Cup. And it's a joke about an Englishman, a Frenchman, an Englishman, and an Australian being caught jumping into a beautiful pristine water in the Andes. And the guy says, "Oh, we're going to take you up to the chief and then we're going to kill you because you trespass on a sacred site." So if you're an American and you don't understand the Australian sense of humour, you really better listen to this one.
So I'll just tell you a story, which is also a boating story, which captures the Australian irreverence. There's three blokes. Some of you have heard the story, but it just captures the thought.
Alan Bond.
Blokes, a Frenchman,
Bob
an Englishman, an Aussie. And hiking in the Andes in the middle of summer. It's about 45 bloody degrees. Sweating like pigs. They get to the top of this mountain, they look down, and there's this most beautiful, pristine lagoon. They go scrambling down the side of the mountain, get their gear off, and dive in. Oh, bloody marvellous. The natives come and grab them, take them to the chief. Chief says, "You have broken most sacred law. This is our most sacred site. For this you die. When we kill you, we take off skin. Out of skin make canoes.
They're going to
Put
skin us.
canoes on lake. Permanent reminder of all people, never infringe our most sacred site. Tie them up." So I tie them up. He says the Frenchman, "Before you die, you have one last wish. What's your last wish?" He said, I would like a knife. So the big knife says, I'm not going to die at the hands of you savages. Vive la France. And over he goes. Then says to the Englishman, "What your last wish?" "Like my friend from across the channel. I do like a knife." Being a knife, and he says, "Like my friend from across the channel. I too am not going to die at the hands of you savages. Go and save the Queen." Then say to the Aussie, "What your last wish?" He said, "I want a fork."
What's a fork, right? Not a knife.
"There goes your fucking canoe."
It's a little bit more Bob Hawke tribute. You got to admit, if you weren't around and you weren't alive to see Bob Hawke as Prime Minister, well, you better watch this.
Labor's longest-serving Prime Minister.
I tell you what, any boss who sacks anyone for not turning up to die in the pub.
Nearly 9 years,
Bring the buggers to water with it.
Bob Hawke was unashamedly Australia's larrikin in the lodge.
Swears like a trooper.
Oh, yeah?
Forms like a playboy. I have my moments.
Both celebrated and derided as a beer-drinking womanizer.
Not too much vino.
At the height of his record-breaking popularity, he was known simply as Mr. 75%.
Darling, you only need another 22% to be neck and neck with me.
Hey, Bob Hawke to
Now, if you don't recognise that, there's Bob Hawke, and I've said one there to Ian on iRock about Mooloolaba possums. This is Dame Edna Everage, so I don't think Ian knows about this. This is a guy who was married with kids, and he got dressed up as a woman, and he went all around the world, and his name is Dame Edna Everage. Have a look.
Record-breaking popularity, he was known simply as Mr. 75%.
Darling, you only need another 22% to be neck and neck with me.
That's Bert Newton. Bert Newton just sadly passed away.
in the same manner would never become Prime Minister.
But those who knew Hawkey best say it was a role for which he was always destined. The only Prime Minister born in South Australia, the supremely self-confident Rhodes Scholar notched up a world record at Oxford University. He later joked made him uniquely qualified to lead the nation, sculling a yard glass of ale in just 11 seconds.
I want to go and have a beer.
Regular face on the picket lines, his elevation to ACTU president in 1969 thrust his obvious skill and ambition into the spotlight.
Gough Whitlam.
On the road and on the rise, it was
Bob Hawke actually supported Gough Whitlam until they backstabbed Gough Whitlam through that coup through the Queen, through the Attorney General here in Australia. And that's when, what's his name, old Two-Face got in. But they actually sacked a legal elected Prime Minister in Australia's history. So if you've never seen anything on Gough Whitlam, you should go down and watch it.
uncommon for him to down 20 schooners in a single sitting.
Your parents are both teetotal.
Yeah, well,
That's Bob's mum.
As his public profile grew,
Do you want to be Prime Minister?
it was Hawke's thirst for power that would ultimately prevail.
I tend, I think, occasionally to take too much refuge in having a drink.
A primetime confessional and self-imposed booze ban, helping pave his way into Parliament. Barely 2 years after his rock star-like arrival,
G'day, how are you? What are you doing in Canberra? Not your business, really, is it?
he would topple opposition leader Bill Hayden in 1983.
Mr. Hawke, could I ask you whether you feel a little embarrassed tonight at the blood that's on your hands?
You're not improving, are you? I thought you'd make a better start to the year than that. It's a ridiculous question. You know it's ridiculous. I have no blood on my hands.
Unaware of the spill, Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser called a snap election the same afternoon. 31 days later, Bob Hawke was Australia's 23rd Prime Minister, inflicting the biggest ever electoral loss on a sitting Liberal Prime Minister.
I, Robert James Lee Hawke, do swear.
He'd go on to win again and again and again.
You couldn't get a better man if you searched the bloody universe than Bob Hawke.
Despite inheriting a crippling deficit, his government struck an accord between business and workers that led to higher wages, Medicare, and compulsory superannuation.
With the accord, the government and the unions started to work together.
Floating the dollar, dismantling market protections, and deregulating the banking sector. He encouraged Australians to embrace their northern neighbours, establishing APEC, protecting Kakadu, stopping Tasmania's Franklin Dam, and leading the global fight against mining in Antarctica.
We have taken too much from the earth and given back too little. It's time to say that enough is enough.
Unveiling a new national
Paul Keating in the background.
And a new national parliament.
The Hawke ministry was the most talented since Federation. I don't think there's been another ministry to come within Cooey.
But there were some spectacular campaign stumbles.
By 1990, no Australian child will be living in poverty.
As
They still are living in poverty.
Celebrations drew the largest.
And just to catch you there, I talked about another time the Aboriginal flag. Can you see it? The black on the top for the Aboriginal, the red on the bottom for the red sand of Alice Springs, and the yellow sun. That's how you got the Aboriginal flag in Australia.
Protests since the Vietnam War. Prime Minister Hawke made this pledge on accepting the Barunga Statement from Indigenous elders.
There shall be a treaty.
3 decades on,
Back in 1988, all those talking politicians.
traditional owners are still waiting.
That's Yothu Yindi.
Yes, in hindsight, perhaps I could have tried harder.
His love of sport endeared him to the public.
We're going to have a bloody win soon, don't we?
And very nearly cost him his sight.
They told us really.
And while Friday horse races became a weekly tradition in the Prime Minister's office, it was his spontaneous celebrations when Australia too won the 1983 America's Cup, which cemented his place in Australian folklore.
Very proud of it in one way. Very disappointed that all the other many brilliant things I've said have and never mentioned. What's the most brilliant thing Hawkie ever said? It's the bum one.
The Prime Minister of emotional extremes.
You don't cease to be a father.
He wept, denying he'd intervened to have his daughter's drug charge dropped.
I had no contact with the judge or anyone involved in it, and yet you have this insinuation.
And again, in the wake of the Tiananmen Square massacre.
Tanks then ran backwards and forwards over the bodies of the slain until they were reduced to pulp.
Announcing unilaterally that Chinese students studying here could stay.
The bureaucrat said to me, Prime Minister, you can't do that. And I said, I've done it.
He led the Commonwealth's fight against apartheid, famously clashing with the British Prime Minister.
We didn't muck around when we had a fight, Margaret, no.
As unemployment spiralled towards its highest level since the Depression.
This is the recession that Australia had to have.
Labor's
That's when I
economic
went
dream
broke.
team began to fracture. Treasurer Paul Keating,
Thanks, Paul.
challenged for the leadership, lost and moved to the backbench,
I wanted his job and I tried to take it off him.
revealing their so-called Kirribilli agreement to hand over the leadership after 2 terms.
I was reluctant to do it because I had then the profound belief that I would continue to be the one best able to lead this government to victory.
Keating's inevitable second strike marking the end of Hawke's reign.
Are you going to fight on?
Yes.
The first Labor Prime Minister dumped by his own party and not the public.
If this was 11 years ago, I'd be getting pretty thoroughly drunk.
Strangers saying goodbye as he arrived at Government House to resign. It was an undignified and unedifying exit.
The important thing is what's in our minds and in our hearts.
The former Prime Minister divorcing Hazel, his wife of 39 years, to marry Blanche Dalpage, with whom he'd been having a long-term affair.
My biographer, my wife, the love of my life.
He would be estranged from his family for many years, reconciling before Hazel's public battle with dementia.
True love never goes smoothly. When you're on a good thing, stick to it.
He never lost his passion for politics either. Putting down his beloved cigars and crosswords to stump for the Labor leaders who followed.
In no tacky emotional sense, it has been an enduring love of my life.
And that love was mutual. For a leader who never lost a federal election and, even in retirement, never quite knew when to walk away.
It's become a sort of friendly compact between me and the mob.
Hospitalised for what he called the wobbles in May 2018, at Christmas he predicted a Labor victory at the next federal election, but worried he mightn't be alive to see it. An advocate for euthanasia, we know exactly how Hawkie should be remembered, because he told us.
I hope they still will think of me as the Bob Hawke that they got to know. A bloke who loved his country and loves Australians, who in the end is essentially a dicky-die Australian.
Australia's oldest living former Prime Minister, Bob Hawke, was 89.
You know, the funniest thing that we have now in this country is that we have all these different prime ministers, but they don't know how to run a country like these former prime ministers did, like Bob Hawke and people before him and Menzies and a few others that did the bad things and the good things. But at least Bob Hawke got out there and had a beer with the people. He got out there and spoke to the people. Not like these prime ministers you got today and premiers we got today. At least Bob Hawke was out there with the people, talking to the people, and he worked with the Indigenous people, and he stuffed up a bit. He stuffed up in a few things, and he admitted it. But not like these other politicians. They can't admit it. But he was one of the greatest prime ministers we ever had. And that's the only reason I'm doing this one story alone on politics, because I feel he was, not because he's Labor, but because he was a true Australian that believed in the Australian intelligence, the Australian ability to develop things and to make things and to show the world how smart Australians can be. And then we get a Premier in New South Wales, Gladys Berejiklian, and it turns around and says, oh, Australia can't make anything, Australia can't do nothing, and you wonder why I get upset. But now she's gone, but unfortunately we're stuck now with her bloody garbage and all the garbage she's left on the Sydney, New South Wales front, but that's our problem. But we elected her in, and that's our problem. So now New South Wales State's got to pay for it. But to the federal government, Bob Hawke, I think, was Australia's most best politician we ever had. 4 times elected. He beat John Howard. He beat Paul Keating, who was his former treasurer. Malcolm Turnbull and all the other ones. We've had all the other prime ministers that come along and got stabbed in the back by their own party. And he was the first prime minister ever to be sacked by his own party in Labor history or the Australian federal political history. Sorry. Anyway, just a little tribute there to Bob Hawke. I hope you enjoyed that. I think he's going to be one of the saddest things I ever met. But I lived through it. Unfortunately, the younger generation today, you didn't know the man. I just think that I thought I'll put that up there. So if you want to see what a great Australian Prime Minister was like, how good he was there with the people, meeting the people, caring about the people, playing bowls, playing cricket, got a cricket ball in the eye, nearly lost his eyesight, is really a true Aussie. So anyway, from Mr. Hominoid, and look, there's a Bob Hawke being friends with John Howard. Even John Howard admitted he was the best Labor Prime Minister they ever had. And he was a Liberal Prime Minister. So see you later from Mr. Hominoid. Just goes to show, politicians still have respect for each other way back then.